Well, thank you, John. I mean, for your leadership of this institute. It's just been spectacular. It's always good to serve a leader who actually you want to serve. Yeah. So it's been fun. Yeah, those chicken dinners tasted pretty good. Hanging around you. I'm personally, energy efficiency, is as close to motherhood and apple pie that you can get. I mean, who can be against efficiency? And I think that energy efficiency in particular has when it was construed, this institute was construed, a problem that we're trying to solve has only become more acute. And this basically, especially with the advent of AI, which has just come at us from the blue, for a good thing. It's not a bad thing. I'm just saying, but the impact of AI on energy consumption has been huge. And then, of course, the fact that we are trying to get away from a fossil-fueled planet to one that is more electrical energy fueled is a huge thing. So in my mind, efficiency actually, at the end of the day, is not only about the efficiency of energy. The beautiful thing about IEE is that it cuts across campus. Beyond College of Engineering, it goes into the social sciences, into political science and everything else. Because at the end of the day, whatever one does in technology is never accepted by society, because there is also an inefficiency in accepting new things. So every time you change, in fact, if you look at life, right, you have an atom or something. Anything that doesn't change state is very efficient. We are on this planet Earth, is spinning around the sun, wasting no energy, otherwise we'd be toast, literally. But anytime you change state, it's an inefficient process. So even if you change your mind, it's inefficient. So I think that I am of the opinion that IEE reflects more than energy efficiency. I think it reflects what's best about our campus. I think we'll be able to translate the technology that's developed here into society because we have this all-of-campus way of doing things. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Umesh. Jeff, do you want to say a few words?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so Henry stole my story because I remember that meeting at your home. I would say when we started this thing, I had no idea it would turn out this well, so it's great. And I guarantee you I had no idea it was going to help fund a building. So the idea originally, was just this sort of umbrella sort of thing, but the more we got into it, the more we realized there was a need across the campus, still is, and it's an insatiable need for more labs and stuff like that. So we were glad, and again, thanks to John. I mean, he's the one person that's been through all this, provided tremendous leadership. I'm not sure he's good for 15 more years, but thank you so much for all you've done, all the leadership, and Henry to support this. And I have to add, I did a match, a 50% match on purpose, because I wanted other people to be behind this. And it turns out that Sean and Brookbyers did the lion's share of the match, so they deserve the recognition that Henry gave them. I think it would have taken longer to get this building built without them jumping in when they did. So, and I think, again, the idea was, this is a great room, and we had a little staff meeting, but the biggest idea was all these labs. So it's really fun to come back after COVID and all that and see everything finally get really being utilized and so forth. So it's just been fun, and I think that we've always got new challenges, but we've built a great base here. I think the work that we're doing now in batteries is something we didn't really talk about way back when. So we're still continuing to find a few things where it makes sense because we've got some fundamental strengths on campus to support those things. So, and obviously AI is a huge new area for everybody. So I'm sure there's a role we'll play in AI as well. Okay, so thanks again. Thanks to be a part of this. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. I can do it. That's fine. All right. All right. Is that better? Okay. I'll talk loud. And for those in the back, there's a lot of seats up front, so feel free to come on in, sit down, relax. So we just heard the story. This began with Jeff and Mark Bertelsen, who's here, and Dan Burnham, who unfortunately just got COVID, so he's not here today after all, and Fred Steck. And so they kind of got this launched. And then a lot of philanthropic support. And again, Jeff and Dan and Mark and Glenn Duval been very great supporters of research in the Institute. And John McFarland here. So it's just been wonderful. Appreciate your support. So I'll go through a bunch of things. I don't have enough time to go into very much depth on any topic we've done or what we're planning to do, but I'll go through some of these. And let's see. I don't know how to work the lid. Maybe if I turn it on, I'll leave that to you. No, I just wanted to point, but that's all right. So we'll talk about all these other things we're doing, summits and some large grants that we've gotten and things like this. We'll go through that in the building and then the 2035 initiative. So, but the concept is this, that rather than focus on clean energy, we'd focus on energy efficiency. And the best power plant is the one you don't have to build. And that theme was important 15 years ago, and it's even more important today. And so that is our focus. We're organized in these three groups: smart societal infrastructure, smart buildings, lighting, things like that, energy efficient computing, AI, communications, and then the whole water, energy, food nexus. And this is all built on the base you can see at the bottom of electronics, materials, fundamentally, AI, energy policy. And so there's a lot of names here. I'll just put some pictures behind it, so many of the people are here. But in fact, maybe we can turn these lights off. All right, if you know how to turn the lights off. Is it looking clear straight ahead? It looks here. Now let's see here. I've done this before. Oh, well. All right, shows what I know. So anyway, I want to thank all these people who really lead all these different research efforts, and I get to stand up here and get credit that I don't deserve. I do want to thank our industry partners. So again, we get a lot of input from companies in terms of what we should work on. We get a lot of financial support from all of these companies, and it's really essential to then spin this information out into the community. So we've had a lot of things. We've had a lot of summits on energy efficiency. This is an early one on the left there. You can see Jeff was interviewing Nobel laureate Steve Chu, who was Secretary of Energy at the time. And so a lot of things like that we've done. More recently, we've been more focused on technology workshops, more rather than sort of global energy efficiency on specific topics like data centers in particular, and getting groups of people together in terms of what the next problems and research we should be doing are. We had a large energy efficiency EFRC grant called SEAM, and this is one of the meetings. And Dave Austin in the back there was our administrative head for that for 5 years, and it was about $19 million and funded a bunch of areas. I'll highlight a couple of them, but particularly solid-state lighting, polymers, materials. So here's one example. About a third of that grant went to a group of about 10 professors that work on organic solar cells. And the important thing here is that they're flexible and low cost. And the company that spun out of this is Next Energy, located downtown. And they're now installing these on windows, right? And so you can adjust the light going through, and you can get energy from that. So that's Next Energy is a very, very exciting company. We worked a lot on thermoelectrics and materials for cooling. And Bolin Liao worked on liquid and immersion cooling, and it's now being adopted by lots of companies to get very, very, operate chips to operate very, very high powers, over a kilowatt effectively. Solid-state lighting, you'll hear from Steve shortly. This is a slide from one of his presentations in 2013, just showing the difference from what everything else is and how fast LEDs have come. And at the time, they were 168 lumens per watt, and the goal was 280. And I think now it's about 250 lumens per watt. And, but more importantly is all the laser work that goes on here, and has applications for, obviously, headlamps for cars, for street lights, and now even for laser fusion. So you'll hear a little bit about that. It's the most recent work that Tsuji Nakamura is doing. And you'll hear about laser-driven chemistry in a couple of slides. So it's really going a lot of different directions. One of the other large grants was this AIM Photonics grant. It's the President Obama set up 17 manufacturing institutes, and so we are the West Coast hub for one of them called AIM Photonics. And it's a lot of funding. It's $110 million in the first increment and 270. And I think our portion is about $10 million of that. And you can see on the right all the companies and universities involved. But that's funded a lot. We've had a lot of interns, over 60 interns in a variety of programs, and that's run in conjunction with a program in CNSI. A lot of lectures, I think over 100 lectures in the last 15 years. These are a few of them. And then Henley Hall. So you can walk around this building afterwards. There's 17 labs. It holds about 170 grad students. And it's LEED Platinum. And again, thanks to Jeff and Judy and Sean and Brooke for funding this building. It allows us to get all of these energy efficiency technologies together in one building. And I think we've seen a lot of benefits from it. So like Steve works now with Chandra in farming. He works with Phil Christopher in terms of catalysis. And so that's the goal. So this building, as you walk around and look at it, it's intended to be naturally lit. There's a lot of glass on both the north and south sides. The ends of the building are open to the outside, and so it's naturally ventilated. The labs are temperature controlled, but this half of the building is entirely naturally ventilated. And it's about 40% more efficient than the last laboratory building built here. And it's there's literally 100 different things that were designed into this building. One of the most obvious ones you'll see as you walk around is chilled beams. So all the labs, except for the chemical labs that need a lot of airflow, are all just temperature stabilized by chilled beams. And so the air flows through these beams, but you don't force air through like a forced air conditioning setup. And that's really good for labs, actually. And it's way more efficient. If you look at the amount of energy that goes into temperature control here versus conventional building, it's less than half. So this building has won 6 architecture awards, so it's been good. Igor Mezic has a lab here, and his focus is how do you control buildings and operate them efficiently. And he uses artificial intelligence for this, but he's been very successful. There's about 42 million square feet of space worldwide that are controlled by algorithms that his group has come up with. And so again, if you look at this building, at the very top, there's glass all around the top. You'll see it more from the 3rd floor. But those are controlled by sensors that look at what's the temperature inside, outside, what direction's the wind blowing. And so again, that lobby is not just a lobby, it's basically a chimney. And as those windows open, then it sucks the hot air out of here and passively without requiring electricity. We've given out a lot of seed grants, I think 16 seed grants, and particularly want to thank John and Patty McFarland and Reese Duca. And they start new research. We primarily focus on new faculty, and then hopefully they get other grants, federal grants or state grants after that. One thing which spun out of this early on was LED lighting. And so again, we had a visitor who had heard about the Institute, and they came, and I was explaining all the wonderful work in LEDs and batteries and solar cells that are going on here. And he said, "Why don't you do something good for the world?" And I was like, damn, I thought that was pretty good. And his comment was, no one in Ghana can afford it. So 75% of the people in Ghana don't have electricity. And it's an annual salary to buy a solar-powered light at the time. So we focused on designing something that was much more cost-effective. And George Holbrook funded the initial demonstration of that. And we spun it out to a nonprofit that we formed. We've now sent 220,000 lights around to 80 countries. So that's just a drop in the bucket compared to the need. The exciting thing is we've got really good statistics from about 25 schools and over something like 5,000 students. But the graduation rate goes up by 30%. So if you give people that don't have electricity a way to read, it really has a big benefit. And because students want to learn, but if you have to stop when it gets dark, that's kind of an impediment. So I want to now sort of focus on the next 15 years, where we go from now. And so my suggestion would be to follow the money. Maybe I can use a laser pointer here. So if you look most recently now, renewables are now a larger investment than oil. So that's a recent change, and hopefully that keeps expanding. And energy efficiency is now the third largest investment flow, at least out of this grouping. So that's important, and hopefully that continues. And finally, a big theme today will be electrification of everything, whether it's lighting, but heating, cooling, cooking, and so forth. And that's growing rapidly. And as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act that Leah and others have really influenced, I think that will grow much, much faster over the next 5 or 10 years. So part of our focus is making every activity more efficient and driving towards renewable energy, hopefully close to 100%. Anywhere here is fine, Min. Min bought a seat. He's one of the sponsors here. So you paid for that seat. So, and in general, just making technology more efficient. So I'll go through all of these. And so one of the exciting things was the work that Steve is doing with Chandra and others at growing things inside under artificial light. You can grow it with 10% of the water that you need outside. There's no insects, and it's very efficient. So that's certainly one goal in general. Economically viable zero net energy buildings, that's Igor's focused. Electrified transportation, you'll hear more about, but obviously EVs are huge. We'll talk today a bunch about green hydrogen, and there's some really great work going on here. And in general, just making heavy industry more efficient. So this is the work that Chandra and Rich are doing on smart farming. And their lab's on the second floor. If you go visit it today, you'll see the robot they have to go out into the farmland and collect data and send it back. So that's a really important area. Another thing which spun out of the Institute early on was Olivier Griffignon was a sort of an entrepreneur in residence. And he started Ag Monitor. And their goal there is, again, more efficient use of water, fertilizer, getting more crop production. And so again, they had a grant with Rich Wolski, where Rich has these automated ways of looking at literally all the farmland in California. Olivier has all of this data and analyzing it to say, okay, what's the right amount of water, fertilizer, whatever, and just get more efficiency and pump less water, because 10% of our electricity in California goes to pumping water. So battery research, we're very excited. Jeff Sakamoto has just been hired. We'll start in a couple of months. And he's working with other people here, Raphael and others. They're listed here. And this is kind of the focus of the battery research here. And if you look over here on the left-hand side, that's kind of where we are with lithium ion. We can have much higher energy densities in the future. And that's their focus. Some of Jeff's contributions specifically on getting away from electrolytes in here and having solid state in between the two electrodes. And that's important because we all know about the problem of lithium-ion batteries shorting out, right? If you discharge too much. But if this is a solid-state material, then you can eliminate that problem. So the focus of the group is making more efficient batteries, making more reliable batteries, and making lower-cost batteries. A lot of these sodium-ion approaches are much, much less expensive. Hydrogen, we've all heard about hydrogen, and obviously it can be a very efficient fuel. So you burn hydrogen in an automobile that produces water, so that's much better than burning hydrocarbons. So that's very exciting. The issue is how do you make hydrogen? And so this part of the slide talks about using carbon-based fuels to generate that. The problem with that is that for every ton of hydrogen you get, you generate 6 tons of CO2. So that's not a very clean fuel by that metric. And so the group here is focused on how do you solve that. And so it's Phil Christopher and Eric McFarland and a bunch of others listed here. And so they're looking at a variety of things. But if you go up to the third floor lab that Chris has Phil has rather. It's all about catalysis. And again, if you combine solid-state lighting, the right wavelength of light with catalysis, you get much more efficient processing of a variety of chemicals. This is the work they're doing on generating hydrogen without CO2. So here's the statistic: 6 tons of CO2 for 1 ton of hydrogen. But now, with a focus on how we generate hydrogen with 0 CO2. And so that's really exciting. And there's also some companies spinning out in this area. So go to the 3rd floor to see more about that. In general, we need, obviously, batteries to make renewables work. And we need to plan the grid appropriately to make this work. And so Ranjit is here, and we'll talk about his work on how do you lay out generation and distribution systems and make stable grids. Because obviously, with electric vehicles, there's huge demands on the grid. Jim Dielson at Ecomerit, has had several companies in wind that have been the dominant wind companies in the United States and worldwide. And more recently now, he's focused on these sorts of things. And so this is a tidal-driven, so rather than air, but this is now tides generating electricity. This is having data centers submerged off the coast, again, driven by renewable energy. And more recently, the most recent work is making desal water out of it. Obviously, California has a big water problem. And rather than pump all this water on shore and do the filtering and then pump it all back again, he's developing ways to do this off the coast in these vertical modules. And that looks very exciting. And hopefully the first demonstration will actually be off our coast. So the 2035 initiative has just happened, and Matta will talk about that later today. But they're focused on accelerating the clean energy transition, phasing out fossil fuels, adapting to climate change. And again, a big part of what this group of doing, a lot of political scientists and economists, is how do you change policy? And the Inflation Reduction Act has a lot of incentives for renewable energy. And so that was great, and they're continuing to along that line. A big part of this whole theme is electrification, not just vehicles in particular, but in your home in terms of heat pumps and so forth. So Matta will talk about that later today. The last topic is sort of how do we make everything else, data centers in particular, more efficient. William Wang will speak in a few minutes. He believes we can get 1,000 times better efficiency in AI ML than we have today. Galen Moody will talk shortly about quantum. And again, we can at least 1,000, maybe 10,000 times more efficient. The nice thing about our quantum work is that it's all room temperature, photonically based. All the Google stuff you've seen, which is very good, world leading, is all cryogenic at about 1 Kelvin. So we think there's some real advantages there. This is the problem. I think you've all heard about it. But this is the growth of these large language models. And this is pretty old. This is GPT-3. But the size of these models and the amount of computing it takes to generate the model is doubling every 2 months. And so that's way faster than the speed of electronics improving or anything else. The other problem is up here, that if you look at how accurate it is versus how many operations it takes, it takes more operations to make it more useful, more accurate, which makes the problem even worse. So down here, this is the CO2 equivalent for GPT-3, and here's 1 human life, right? It's a small fraction of that. So these are not small numbers, and we really need to make AI more efficient. So William and the CS folks, in fact, the whole 2nd floor here is mostly AI folks working on that end of it, and the other end is improving the hardware. So I won't go through William's plan. I stole this from him, but they've got a very elaborate plan for the next 40 years in terms of how do we make AI much more efficient. Finally, the interconnecting these computers and things by fiber optics has gotten way, way more efficient. We've gotten 100 million times more efficient than the early transmission across the ocean. This metric is useful because it's easy to measure. What does it take to get a bit from here to England? We've really done much better, but we need to continue this. So we're working on very heavily integrated photonics, very high capacity photonics, so as to keep continuing that curve. Data centers in particular are really limited by interconnects, right? You have all these very high power NVIDIA GPUs, TPUs, and they're waiting for data, right? Because it's expensive to interconnect them optically. And so what we need to do is integrate this on silicon and make it much more efficient than it is today. And so this is some of the chips that we've been making, Luc Thigarage and myself, for 10 terabit links and beyond. We've transferred this technology, this silicon photonics technology, to Intel, and this is some of their progression from 100 gigabit transceivers to 400 gigabit, most recently 800 gigabit, but they are shipping, tens of millions of these transceivers now per year. This is Galen's work on quantum computing, and again, we're trying to develop an entire platform for quantum computing, but this is all photonic based, so we need to entangle photons and to generate the qubits. And it's all done at room temperature, which is what is really advantageous over, say, the Google quantum efforts and others. What's drawn down here is the material systems that we're working on here, which have much, much higher efficiency than what most of the world has been doing for photonics. So that's the improvement. So that's a vast run through all the research. I want to thank the staff, Jenna and Mark, and the rest of the staff for pulling together today's symposium and just everything they do to process all the grants and keep all the grad students employed. To summarize, over the last 15 years, there's been a lot of progress in all of these areas. And I hope you'll take advantage of the tours to go visit some of these labs and meet some of the grad students and professors involved. We need a lot of progress, right? Things are not looking good. So we need to accelerate the research that we're doing. There are a lot of companies spinning out. Here's a list of the companies that have spun out of UCSB in this energy area. And I think that's a lot of jobs and it's a lot of research and very successful. The final point is here. Temperature is rising. Climate change is real. It's painful. Carbon dioxide is rising rapidly in the atmosphere. And so we really do need to accelerate the research that we're doing. And so with that, I'll stop. I don't know if there's any brief questions on that. Be glad to take a couple of questions. All right. For all the folks back there, there's a lot of seats up here. Why don't you come on in and sit down, and we'll transition.